Hello.
Okay, folks, I realized yesterday was a disaster, but we're going to get through this today. We left off bringing up the topic of greenhouse effect, which leads us into a little bit more depth in terms of greenhouse effect and how climate change works. Basically, is it a hoax? If you look at data everywhere, it suggests that it is not. It's only the people down below that think it's kind of a science crazy thing. Either way, I'm here to present the facts and the data that support things like climate change. Places around the world are getting warmer everywhere, not just the cold places, but everywhere. Places that are dry are already getting drier. Places that are wetter are getting wetter. It's not balanced. So even here in a place like Winnipeg, where we experience extremes in terms of temperatures, you can see results of climate change everywhere. Think of the past 2 summers. We had the wettest September ever after 2 of the driest summers ever. We've had a very mild winter this year. Very little snow compared to usual years. So if you pay attention to stats, things have gone a little bit crazy. In your lifetime, you've had the coldest, the wettest, the snowiest, and as well, about 20 years straight of the warmest year ever on record here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, as well as the world. So, how does that happen? We're going to talk about some gases, some emissions that come into play here. I asked you to look for, when we hopefully you did the vocabulary sheet, these 4 emissions should have come up. If they didn't, no big deal. But the 4 big ones would be nitrous oxide, methane, CFCs, a fancy word or easier way to say chlorofluorocarbons, and of course carbon dioxide. The graph where you can't see the actual percentages represents those 4 gases. Okay, so the big blue percentage right here, this is 77% of all greenhouse emissions. So that's carbon dioxide. So, 3/4 of the greenhouse emissions would be carbon dioxide. Now that sounds terrible because it's pretty much like what I'm doing right now. I'm emitting carbon dioxide by just breathing. You can't do anything else, right? Things like methane, there's preventable actions. CFCs, we've done a lot to prevent that, and nitrous oxide, preventable, of course. The amount of carbon dioxide doesn't have to be that. But one positive thing is that 77% of all emissions are carbon dioxide, because as you'll find out very shortly, they are, in a sense, the least dangerous gas out there, okay? So when we talked about, and one of the vocabulary was global warming potential, that would be important for, let's say, if more methane was unleashed, which it will be, nitrous oxide, if more was released, which it will be, and CFCs would be crazy. However, we've kind of eliminated that curve because of things that we've done. That was a big deal when I was your age. It isn't so much anymore. Okay? So we'll go through each of these together or separately. All right? Basically, there's a lot of stuff here. I don't need you to know everything. I've bolded and underlined stuff that you need to know. And basically, if you look at this, it's kind of one thing, right? So even half of it is covered up. No big deal. But CO2, carbon dioxide, this is the one that gets all the news because it's the biggest percentage, 77%. So, everything we do, driving, industries, when volcanoes erupt, that is emitting CO2. So what we have to understand is that, again, here's all the gases that we have or will go through, most of them anyways, and CO2 is right at the top, and GWP stands for global warming potential, and as you can see from the middle bolded line there, CO2 has a global warming potential of 1. Okay? that's pretty good. So there's a lot of it out there, but realistically, it doesn't do as much as the others would if there were the same percentages in those ones, let's say, okay? So I would just ask that you know that the global warming potential of CO2 is the lowest of the greenhouse gases, all right? You probably in science or somewhere throughout your social studies lives talked about the carbon cycle before. I'm not going to get too much into it because of that. Obviously, you know that everything around us is kind of built from carbon. The carbon cycle, everything's recycled. Someone dies, goes into the ground, and here we are. So I'm just going to kind of skip through that. Of course, we have things like trees that kind of are vacuums and suck this stuff out of the atmosphere. So hey, let's keep cutting them down and see how that works as we emit more. Good plan, okay? Methane is the dangerous one because right now, as things are getting warmer, we are starting to release more methane. That's particularly important for places like Manitoba and further north. As the permafrost, the areas that are permanently frozen, start to thaw like a nice steak, they are starting to release all this organic matter into the atmosphere. And that's what methane is. Garbage dumps have a lot of methane. The beef industry produces a lot of methane because cows eat grass and then burp and fart and all that stuff goes up into the atmosphere. So the more beef we eat, the more methane we produce. So there's a quick fix. I'm not asking you to stop eating beef. I love beef myself, but maybe we can reduce it. Instead of having beef twice a week, maybe it's once a week. Instead of having beef 6 times a week, maybe we can do it 3 times a week. And therefore, we're making choices to kind of help this scenario out. But as you can see, methane, right in the middle, underlined there, has a global warming potential of 21. Now, all of a sudden, that's 21 more times more severe than global warming. So, the emissions of methane would warm the globe 20 more times than CO2 would. That's why the global warming potential is so important. So we want to keep that methane emission as low as we possibly can. So producing more garbage, eating more beef, that's not going to help this situation. And you can see over here, well, you can't, but I've posted these, or I will post these notes. You'll see that every single graph that I'm talking about, the level is going up. So temperatures are going up, levels of CO2 are going up, levels of methane are going up, levels of nitrous oxide are going up. Pretty consistent in terms of human-made things that are causing the global warming thing to happen, okay? So the next one we're dealing with is nitrous oxide, and right in the middle, GWP of 206, again, you can compare that to carbon dioxide, it's way worse, right? So we want to keep that number even lower than the methane number if we can. It's covered up by the graph, but I'll fix that for when I post this. Basically, nitrous oxide is, we've produced ways to make fertilizer. Okay, so think of all the agriculture that is around the world that feeds all the humans that are around the world. If you want to grow things better, fertilizer is good. Okay, but fertilizer going into the ground and then evaporating into the air, not good for warming, as you can see by the global warming potential. So as we increase humans in population, probably going to have to increase fertilizer to increase the agriculture so that we can all eat. Not a great scenario. So this is not a good situation because we are going to increase in population. People are going to want to still eat. People are going to have to put garbage in garbage dumps. And if we want to feed the population, we've got to grow agriculture and we've got to use fertilizer. Are there other ways? Absolutely. Stop having kids, folks. No, that's not it. We just have to be smarter in terms of how we produce food. And when we get to population later on this year, You'll understand how the stats work in terms of growth rates of certain countries. If we can curb that, then we can curb this. Okay? CFCs, oh, this is great. A lot of it writing here again. I only need you to understand the underlying stuff. This is basically non-existent. In the 1980s, they made a rule that said stop producing CFCs. I remember when I was a kid, all air conditioners, all fridges, all cars with air conditioners, every aerosol can had CFCs in it. Okay, and that produced a hole in the ozone that we all know of, which gave, you know, an incredible amount, a huge surge of skin cancer worldwide, because the rays are now more damaging, because the thing that protects us from the rays is now kind of like saran wrap instead of glass, right? So notice the global warming potential. It's 11,000 more dangerous than CO2. So that's not great news. So it's a good thing that we've stopped producing this stuff, and that has curbed it. So this one isn't as important. I just wanted to throw it in there because it is potentially crazy if we still have them. Okay? One thing I do want you to understand, though, is the greenhouse effect is needed. Okay? If we didn't have the greenhouse effect, we would all be dead. So would all the plants, and so would all the other animals. There'd be too much differential heat around the world. We need that heat to stay in. The problem is we're basically tinting our greenhouse, and that's affecting how much radiation escapes. We're keeping more in than we ever have. So the greenhouse effect is a needed commodity. We have to have it, otherwise we won't survive. But we're just, you know, if you've ever been in a greenhouse or ever sat in a car and felt the sun, it feels hot, okay, because the radiation is staying inside. And now we're just making it so that it can't escape as much as it used to, okay? The albedo effect, I don't know why the titles are like this, they weren't earlier, but either way, the albedo is basically how reflective is something. So that's helping the greenhouse effect for now, because as we continue the global warming, we're getting rid of the things that are more reflective, like snow and ice. Think of the ice glaciers, Antarctica and Greenland. They're now turning blue instead of white. White is like a mirror, blue, you know, allows some absorption. So obviously if we rid the world of ice and snow, things are going to absorb a lot more, and therefore the world is going to get hotter again, okay? So we want to keep around the stuff that is brighter in color. Like for example, me in the summertime, if I take my shirt off, I can, you know, almost reflect planes down of the sky because I'm so white and it's like a mirror, okay? If you ever wear a dark shirt in the summer, it feels warmer, doesn't it? So this again is a kind of a graph showing you that the ocean would be more absorbent than an ice sheet, for example, okay? And obviously forests, dirt, darker colored things would be more, they would have a low albedo, that's what it means. So ice would be high albedo, soil would be low albedo, okay? Ice, as we said, is important. Let's try to keep it around, not just for the animals like polar bears and stuff, but for global warming. These places are at the highest risk in global warming because if we lose our ice sheets, start digging a hole, okay? A deep one. Forests, they're absorbent, okay? They have a low albedo. They're not very reflective, but they serve another purpose. They soak in all the junk that we throw up, okay? They are the world's lungs, and if we keep cutting down forests like we are, you know, we're not gonna have the same quality of air. And again, those numbers that we just went through will continue to go through the roof. Anyways, you can see deforestation is an issue in a lot of places. The amount of forests that used to be there are being cut down for a variety of reasons: agriculture, cities, you know, you name it. The places that I've circled are, you know, in danger because those dry areas are spreading. That's the opposite We want those green areas to spread. But hey, people need a place to live. And we gotta cut down rainforests so we can produce palm oil so that we can eat things like chips, right? Will this happen in Winnipeg? Yeah, it is. It has. Okay, in my lifetime, I've gone through some of the biggest events in Winnipeg's history. In your lifetime, you probably will as well. Flood of the century, the biggest snowstorms, wettest summers, wettest falls, driest summers, hottest summers, 20 years in a row. These things are all happening. We grow a lot of agriculture, so if, plants, just like humans, need water. If it doesn't rain, okay, think of Thanksgiving this past Thanksgiving. Okay, we had an incredible snowstorm. Is that normal? So let's keep doing things like this. What I would like you to do, and I have an assignment that I'll basically put like the vocabulary, complete or incomplete. I'd like you to watch the documentary Before the Flood. I will put a link on Edsby for you, as well as the assignment for you shortly. Be patient, it's Thursday right before the weekend. It really goes into various areas around the world that are struggling with climate change, and it's a really, really good documentary, especially the last 2-minute speech of DiCaprio. Kind of makes me get goosebumps on my arms every time I hear it, but you have the ability to change things. Know what you're eating. Know your ingredients. How are you throwing garbage away? Right now, nobody's going anywhere, so we're not driving as much, which is good, which is actually changing the landscape and the emissions that we're producing as a population. So fortunately, but unfortunately, we're stuck right now. But you as a consumer, talk to your parents, make sure they're buying good stuff, read the ingredients, where are they coming from, have they traveled far distances, think about eating chicken more than beef, things like that. The footprint will get smaller. See you later.